Some people say that the first thing that you should do when you wake up in the morning is to make your bed. For one reason, it's helpful because it helps keep your room clean, tidy, and certainly parents try to encourage this at a young age. But also because there's another reason. People have said that that's a very easy and small task for you to complete at the beginning of your day. And if you can do that and get that done, it gives you some energy and motivation to complete other tasks that you have throughout the day. And certainly that is very true. Likewise, people have taken similar wisdom to say, it's not about the destination. It's not about actually completing the task that you're trying to do. It's the work and the journey that happens in the middle leading up to the completion or the destination, the ending of a task. That's actually what energizes you, that gets you through. That's the good thing. And I think there's some truth to that too. And the simple phrase that people say is, it's not the destination, it's the journey. That's what we're living for. That's what motivates us, gives us energy. That's what really excites us. And we feel the sense of accomplishment as we're going through the journey until the journey's end, or you complete the task, the end goal of whatever it is that you're doing and whatever work. I think there's plenty of truth in that. But, and anytime you say but, it negates everything that you just said, right? Because here comes the other part of it. Not necessarily, but there is something to consider with that. Is I am afraid that within our Western secular society, we have not considered the ultimate end. In our last video, we introduced the idea of hope and how everybody has a hope. We might have all sorts of different hopes in life, but ultimately there is an ultimate hope that you base your entire life around. What do we mean by hope? It is the idea of an expectation or the desire for something to happen. You might have a good rational reason as to why you hope for something to happen. There might just be no good reason, but you're just hoping beyond, sometimes we say hoping beyond hope, that something will happen. Either way, there is something that captures your imagination, your heart, your thinking, how it is you prioritize your finances, the time that you spend through the 168-hour week that we all have. If you sit back and think introspectively, what is it that I prioritize the most and why, you're going to get a closer idea to what it is you actually believe is your hope is for the future. And that's important to know. Because our society tells us, for not bad reasons, that we should be about taking care of the poor, that we should be about justice, that if there's anyone that is out there where injustice has happened to them, we should be fighting for them. We're about the idea of egalitarianism. We want, generally, though it is very much debated, a roughly equal and fair society. Again, debated topic, but for the most part, we're wanting people who are in situations of poverty to be brought out of poverty so that economically they can take care of themselves, their families, they can feed and clothe and provide shelter for themselves and those of their loved ones. Those are generally things that all people across political aisles agree on. It's the idea of what is often called in the buzzword progress. And most people, whether they know it or not, within secular Western, especially America, have their hope in the idea of progress, which is to say, through science, technology, innovation, our expanding mind through liberalism, say that right, liberalism, the idea of the freedom to be able to educate, to pursue curiosity, to learn, to further figure out ways in which we can make the world a better place. Not just a better city or society, the world a better place. I mean, in medicine, just to use as an example very quickly, it's not just that we're trying to innovate and further expand our engineering and medical education to the point where we try to get people to live longer. It's also that we're trying to help people live a good life in the last 10 years of their life. Some of you can relate to this. Obviously, Lord willing, I'm not relating to the last 10 years of my life anytime soon. But for most people, when they get into their 60s, 70s, and 80s, one of the struggles is getting onto the floor and back up. Why? muscle fatigue or just lack of muscle mass, balance, bones, joints, so forth. How is it that we can help people go through a regimen of exercise and diet to see, again, through science and testing and putting together a hypotheses and putting those out to test, how can we get our population that in the last 10 years of their life, they can bend over to tie their shoes and get back up without this being a great struggle? That's part of the idea of progress. We're trying to make the world a better place. We're trying to help you live a better life. We're trying to help all sorts of people live a better life, whether that's in medicine, whether that's in economics, anything. Not a bad thing. A Christian can be on board with this, but for different reasons. So we could start in all sorts of places. So we're going to do a rough history of how it is that we've gotten to this bizarre place that we are here in history. Because here's the reality. We live in a rather affluent time, and while we all can complain about inflation, the price of groceries, the price of gas, and how wages haven't increased with inflation, and issues that we have with our economy, and all sorts of things with that, relatively speaking, we live in a wonderful time compared to many of our ancestors. And yet there's a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety, a lot of, you could call it mental health issues, you could call it other issues if you'd like, within our society today where people just generally are not happy, nor do they think we have a good future ahead of us. You can notice this. In the 19th century moving forward, we really had this idea of progress of saying, hey, look, through the Industrial Revolution, through the education system that we are building, through our advances in medicine, our advances within the system of capitalism, we're pulling people out of poverty and giving them better lives. There was a lot of hope moving forward until the First World War and then the Second World War. And what was really bad about the Second World War is the country all about innovation, liberalism, freedom, the high culture society of Germany at that time eventually led to a point where 6 million Jews, several others, gypsies, paraplegics, homosexuals, all sorts of people were murdered because one group of people within Germany that took over found that they were not fit for society. Awful. What happened to our idea of progress and making the world a better place that would lead people to believe such certain things and perform acts that were obviously horrible acts against fellow man? There's a lot of things that we could say about this, but eventually what had happened was that it led to a system of philosophy known as existentialism, where people were wrestling with how can we, as advancing man, we thought of ourselves as better than our ancestors before. We thought of them as lesser because look at us and all the innovation that we're doing. C.S. Lewis would call that chronological snobbery. We thought of ourselves higher than what we really should have. But it made us wrestle with where is it that we are actually going? Can science and the pursuit of knowledge actually help? We really had this belief that if we would educate the masses, and through education, through broadening of the minds across the board in our populations, the world would be a better place, but not necessarily true. And so you could almost pinpoint moving forward in the 50s, moving on, much of our art, what would become movies, TV shows, music, it changed from this positive view of the future to a negative view of the future. We were moving towards what we hope to be a utopia. We built a wonderful grand city where people were happy and prosperous, to now much of our art and culture believes that we're heading towards a dystopian future. Whether it's the science fiction-y zombie apocalypse, which was and still is the rage in certain art and movies and so forth, or something that's slightly more realistic and thermonuclear war that would happen, that would wipe out populations because we believe we're going to kill each other at some point. We believe that society is going to collapse. We've lost our hope in the idea that, hey, we're going to progress to this better place. And still, people are trying to do that. And if you notice any advertising or mantras or mottos to especially tech or innovative companies and startups, they all have something to do with the idea that we're moving forward. We're trying to progress to the better world that we're trying to build, right? And again, that in and of itself is not necessarily bad, but why are you doing it? Do you actually have a basis for it that says, hey, when we all eventually die, is there something that is beyond that's going to carry this over? Or is it all eventually going to wash out? The first problem is our secular idea of progress really did not wrestle with the reality of our own mortality. It's great and all that we should try to build the world and make the world a better place, but if it all washes out in the end, again, C.S. Lewis once tried to make the argument that you don't have to think about the shortness and brevity of life by thinking about the possibility of nuclear war. Try to answer the question, who was your great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother? By name, and also what was her personality like, what did she like, what did she not like, who was she like? Most people, unless they're just Ancestry.com fanatics, and even then, at best you might have a name, but you don't know much about them. And the reality is, at some point, you and I, we will be that great something that no one remembers. The pictures disappear in a closet somewhere or thrown away at the landfill probably at some point. And it'll be as if you never existed. And Solomon once said in Ecclesiastes, you might build up great wealth to lead on to your children, but who's to say that your children and their children will deal with it wisely? It's kind of the same principle. You can't control anything that happens beyond, much less the memory of your own existence. All that to say, if you're trying to live a life that is righteous, ethical, you take care of the poor, you take care of people who bad things have happened to them, you try to make the world a better place, only for you and everyone else around you to eventually die in the heat death of the universe, doesn't that render everything meaningless? Okay, of course it does. Therefore, you can't just live life as we're all about the journey. We're not so much focused about the end, because then you're just not consistent. Then you are not wrestling with the reality that what is part of the reason we have so much anxiety, part of the reason we have so much depression, part of the reason that we don't have a good hope about the future is because we're not thinking about the future, the ultimate future at the very end. But again, it's not just that. It's those grounding of those reasons to say, even in the journey, everything that I'm doing, does that ultimately matter? We as Christians say that it does. Some atheists like Sam Harris would say, no, the reality of death and the fact that there's nothing after life, that actually gives you the best reason to say, here's why it is we want to live good, because this is the only life that we have. I get where you're coming from, but to negate everything that I just said there, you still have to wrestle with that problem of, fine, I try to take care of the one life I have as best as I can until all of a sudden one day out of nowhere, there's no memory of it, as if it never happened. And therefore, doesn't that just render it meaningless? Isn't that inconsistent in your thinking? I think that it is. If you want to be a person who wants to do good things, to make the world a better place, the idea of true progress, there actually is that idea in Scripture. There actually is the idea that we are working to make the world a better place. We are striving in a kingdom that lasts forever. In our next episode, we'll dive into that. But for now, you just need to ask yourself the question, with what use is it for my time to strive and to labor to make the world a better place if at the end of the day, no one's going to remember it?